So I decided to dedicate this podcast and change it a little bit and dedicate it actually to some more useful stuff. And today we are going to talk about Python. We are going to start with Python tutorial. This will be a series of tutorials about Python, and in today's lecture we will be talking about variables and the shell in Python. So this will be a lot better and more exciting episode than previous episodes of ZomCast, and I hope that you liked it because this is not just the tutorial. After that, we will have some updates about the latest software news, and also, yeah, I will give you the social links for this podcast so that you can find us and follow us. So let's get going. So Python. First of all, you need to select a system for your development. I'm going to use this IDE, or better say is a code editor. This is called Visual Studio Code, and it's a very popular code editing tool nowadays. Almost every developer knows it. And we are going to use it for development of our Python tutorial scripts. Note that Python is as a little bit of an introduction. Python is a kind of loosely typed language, but it's quite easy to learn. Don't get me wrong, it's not just very easy and too easy, because it has some intricacies and that you need to learn about, that you need to know as a professional developer if you want to seriously do some development with this programming language. But in general, when compared with some other language like C programming language or C++, it's a whole lot easier to learn. And also, in terms of object-oriented programming and model, it's also much easier. So, first of all, you need to know about shell. What is shell? Python has a very nice shell that you can use to experiment with the language and know how it works. For example, in this IDE, in this code editor, we can actually experiment with that, and I will show you how it works. To open this shell, all you need to do is to press Control and backtick. It opens a new terminal if it's not already open, or toggle to an existing one if you have already opened it before. So I open Python. You see, I entered Python 3 because this is the version that is installed on my system. So it opens the Python shell for me, and here I can experiment with Python. In this shell, we can run different commands of Python. For example, I can write print hello world and print hello world. And by the way, Python commands and statements don't have semicolon, and you don't need to enter semicolon. Actually, you're not allowed to, because if I enter print hello world, semicolon, actually you can enter, but you don't have to. Okay, so this is the one way to get started with Python in the shell. You can also do a lot of common calculations in this shell. For example, if you want to calculate some numbers and some adding up, summing up, like 233 plus 33, it gives you the result. So you can also use this as a calculator, and so they call it calculator mode, using Python in calculator mode. So we are using that way. And one of the first things that you need to know about Python is it's actually variables. So I can show you how variables works in this calculator mode in the shell, but because I want to keep the code for you so that later you can go and see the code and I can share it with you, I'm going to create a script. And fortunately, we are working in an editor. So now that we have an editor, I create a script. All I need to do is to go to the left and press new file. And I name the file like app. And the extension for it is py. So this is the way to create a script, a Python script, a Python program. And after that, we create a variable. This is not the ultimate way to start a script, but since today's topic is about variables, we create a variable. So this variable is gonna be name, okay? I create a name and pass it like my name, Mehdi. Now that I have assigned something to this variable, I can use it. Like for example, I can print this hello name. But since we are going to use a variable inside a string, I can actually do this f. I need to do this f. This is one way to tell Python that please be careful, I might be using some variable inside this string, so you need to display it for me. And also, since I want to use a variable, I need to put that variable inside curly braces. Now Python will replace name with the value of this variable and display it for me. Therefore, if I run this, let's actually run it and see the output. I create another terminal in VS Code. This way, Python 3, the name of our Python interpreter, because this is the program that runs this script. You need to write the name of this script, the name of this interpreter first, and then the name of your program, which is app.py. And you can see that the output is displayed to us. So there are a lot of types. There are different types of variables we can define in Python. One of the obvious ones is string, which you can see I have already used it. This is a string because it's a name, you know. And we also have integer. An integer is some numerical number. Like for example, if you want to save your age, you need to put it in a variable of the type integer or int. We call it int in Python. So for age, I type like 30. This is integer, and note that we don't specify specifically that explicitly that this type is going to be integer. We just name the variable that we want to create and then they put the value in it. Python is smart enough to know and infer from this assignment what type of this variable is, what type this variable is. This variable is integer. All right, and another type. So I put some comment here. And what is comment? By the way, comment is a piece of code that will not be executed by Python. It is just for adding some comments and explanations to part of code so that you or some other people can later study your code and learn something. And remember what you do, what you did with your code before. So this is int type, int type. This one is a string, str in Python terminology, and we also have float. We have float, and what type of variables and what type of values we can put in float. If you have a number that has some decimal points, decimal parts, like for example your weight, you know, or your height, your height. Let's say, let's find a height 6.1. 6.1 if we say, if we use some decimal to display the the actually the foot part, the inch part of your height, we can use float. So if you are 6.1 or 6 foot 1 inch tall, height centimeter, we can display it this way as a float number. So height 6.1, 6.1, and when I enter this, Python automatically knows that the type is float here. You can see that when I hover my mouse over this variable name height, it automatically recognizes that the type is float, although we didn't say it's float. Okay, the other type that we have, so we have a string, we have integer, float. Hopefully these will be enough for a lot of your needs for in your programs. But we also have the type none, which is something like nothing. If you have nothing to put in a variable, let's create a variable like I name it I don't know what, and put it none. Okay, the value of this is none, and if you hover over it, Python knows that this editor tells us that its type is none, something like nothing, as I said. So we have age, we have name, age, height, we also have weight. We can also use weight as float, like let's do a simple conversion to, for example, convert like 80 kilograms to pounds. And it's equal to 176.37. 176.37. And this is float too, and it automatically, the editor knows that it is float. Now we want to run them. We want to use these variables. Note that I used name, I used this variable inside a string here, and since I wanted to put the variable inside a string, I needed to precede it with f. But you can also do this. For example, you are age plus, or actually you don't even need that, 30 years old. Note that I'm putting a plus between them to add them together, and it will concatenate and join these three parts of the string and display you are 30 years old. And by the way, since we have put our age inside the age variable, I use age variable here. Another thing that we have, print your height and weight. We display them. I want to use them inside this string. I can also use it with this form, but this is often more convenient and easier, so I put f in front of it, and then your height and weight. For height, I use the height variable, and for weight, I use the weight variable. Very convenient and very nice. So I hope that it doesn't frustrate you. It's just almost done, almost that. We are not going to talk much more about Python today. It's just the variables and the variable types that you will need in Python. By the way, Python is a very powerful programming language and you will love it. So now let's run it again. Python 3, Actually, I don't need to always run it from this terminal. I can press this button over here and run Python final in terminal, and VS Code automatically runs it for me. All right. Looks like we had a problem here. You can concatenate string, not int string. Yes. So if this age, the type of this age was, string, then we could join them together. But since it is integer, Python has no way of knowing how to do it and cannot join them together. And if I use name here, it will have no problem. It will do it. You can see that it works. But it cannot join string and some other type of variable like integer or float. So how do we solve it? By putting that variable, by putting the variable inside the string, like we usually do. But make sure you also add f before it so that Python knows it has to replace the variables with their value before using them. Okay, we run it again, and there we go. Hello, Matt, you are 30 years old, your height and weight. Okay, so that's it for a basic tutorial of Python. We learned about these strings, different types of variables that we can use in Python, like a string, integer, float, and also none. We don't usually use none, but sometimes it happens in programming that the type of something is just none when you don't have a value for it. For example, the user is supposed to enter something and they enter nothing, and therefore your input is none, nothing. Okay, hopefully this gives you a basic idea of how Python works and its basic variables. Don't worry, we have a lot to talk about Python, and we will learn. I will teach a lot about Python in the coming episodes. But now it's time to talk about some exciting news. So what is that? Some recent exciting news. It happened for you. I bet it has happened to you that you want to post some photo somewhere and you don't want to risk your privacy, and you don't want to really give out your real photo, and you don't want to post the photo of someone else. You want to give an estimate to them of how you look, but not by giving your exact and your specific photo. There's a service, actually they have a website called generated.photos, and on this website they use some AI algorithms that allows you to upload your photo, and then it runs some AI algorithms on your photo. It creates a photo for you that is a bit similar. Actually, it gives you a lot of photo suggestions that all of them are generated based on your photo, but none of them is specifically you. So you can go ahead and use those photos, any of those photos, as your profile picture somewhere in social media or somewhere. I hope that you like it. I liked it, for one. The next thing is WhatsApp's disappearing messages. I think that we talked about this in some of in one episode, in a couple of episodes before, but now it is available. It was coming then, but now it is available, and you can use in the latest version of WhatsApp. And if you turn it on, you can actually give it some timer, something like a timer for a message to disappear after that. And I think currently this timer is about 7 days, and after 7 days the message that just disappears. Okay, after that the next thing is Google testing a major iMessage. Sorry, I didn't change this. Yeah, let's post the photo. Let's change the photo of the video to this podcast, today's podcast. ZomCast 14. All right. And I hide VS Code now because we are done coding. All right. Google testing a major iMessage feature. If you are an iPhone user, you know that iPhone has some feature that when two people have both are both using iPhone, you can use the messages application actually to send the message over not the carrier. You can send it over Wi-Fi or the internet. You know what I'm saying. It's very useful feature, and when both of the parties of the call or message have iPhone installed and connected to the internet, they see each other as blue, in blue color, and that blue color tells them that the other party has iMessage, and you can easily and quickly send the messages. In iMessage you can send photos, you can send video or something because it's just running in an encrypted and quick environment. And now Google is testing on a similar feature, I think, and that's currently in the beta stage. They are in the testing phase, and you can learn more about this on Phone Arena, where I found this piece of news. Another thing is Android Insights podcast. I really like this because Android is a very, very complicated ecosystem for programming and development of it. Therefore, the more podcasts you have to learn about this development toolkit and its development toolkits, the better. And now Android developers team provided this specifically Android related and oriented podcast, and it is called Android Insights Podcast. To learn more about it, please go to developer.android.com, where you can find more about this podcast. And the article of the week is about PHP 8. Last week we talked about PHP 8. And if you wonder, PHP 8 has some new features that might not be compatible with all of your existing code base and your projects that are already in production, your websites, especially your WordPress websites. A lot of you might be using WordPress websites, so you have to make sure that it is actually compatible with PHP 8. So if you want to make sure how to do it and make it compatible with PHP 8, please go to wptavern.com and read this article about getting your WordPress plugins and themes ready for PHP 8. So that's it for ZomCast 14. I hope that you liked this podcast. Please hit the like button if you liked it, and let me know what you think of the podcast, and give me your suggestions on on what you like to be discussed in this podcast. Any tutorials are welcome, any tutorial ideas. I will provide them as soon as possible. Next week we will talk more about Python. I will teach more about Python. This week we learned about variables and data types in Python, and I think next week will be about modules and methods, modules and functions. Yeah, they call it functions in Python. So thanks for watching, and see you.